Okay, we're going to talk about the DuBois land and house from the time the DuBoises came to the U.S. And I'm probably standing right in front of you. How about if I'm over here?
No, you're good.
From
You're good. I'll move.
Okay. To when they purchased the land around here and the different owners of the DuBois house. To start off, we've got a DuBois family tree. I'll quickly go through it. There was Louis DuBois, who was born in France. He came to the U.S. in 1660. He got land grants of 4,300 acres, so he must have been in good with the kings or queens at the time. But the land that he got was mostly up in the town of Gardiner and outside of New Paltz. It wasn't the area where DuBois had in Wallkill here. He was there for a few months, and his wife and 3 sons were captured by Indians. At least some say it's hearsay. But anyway, he went down and with the militia, and they attacked the Indians, recovered his wife and 3 sons. One of his sons, Louis DuBois, there would be no DuBoises around here if they didn't capture him or recover him, married a Rachel Hasbrook. His son, Jonathan DuBois, he moved back to Kingston for some reason or other. He married a Lefevre. And the son of Jonathan is Andries DuBois. This is Andries of the Andries DuBois house. And he married a Sarah Lefevre. So there's a little bit of married his mother's cousin, nephew, niece. And in 1759, Andries DuBois purchased the Wallkill land, where the house sits today. That was out of a patent known as the Van Dam patent. This is the Wallkill River running north. Wallkill is roughly in here. This is the Barberry patent that Matt talked about a couple of weeks or last month. But the slice that he bought ran all the way up to the ridge. Now, Van Dam died in 1749. He's the one that had the patent. And a Charles Broadhead acquired the patent land. He was the son of Catherine DuBois, in other words, the sister of Andres' father. So he really bought that from his cousin. And in the deed, it calls for laying out a public high road on the brow of the hill in the plains. And that would be basically where Wallkill Avenue is, and then turns into River Road. The land that they got, if you laid it over today's map, this is Straw Ridge Road that runs up over the hill. Town is sitting in here. 208 goes this way. But at one time, Andres, when he bought it, basically owned all of Wallkill. The house was sitting here. It went down to the other side of DuBois, but it ran all the way across Plains Road and on over the hill to where 302 goes across the top of the ridge. It was roughly 590 acres that he bought. But later on it showed he only bought 300, so I suspect he bought part of it and somebody else bought the other part. Now his neighbors were Justice Banks. He had bought the lot above it, and he built a house there also. Alan White lives in that house now today. And Cornelius Bruin had the other lot, and that was the Finney house. That was the one that the bank took down for the parking lot. An interesting map is the 1775 map. Now this was during Revolutionary War times. If you'll notice, here's New Windsor. There was a straight line from New Windsor over the hill. This would be by St. Andrews, up over the hill by the Borden place, and down through the Borden farm back down to where 208 is. Wallkill would be right in this area, but it wasn't around at that time. One of the reasons they probably had this road, the Revolutionary War soldiers, they practiced over here. And so they needed to get from New Windsor up there probably within a day. But a lot of the roads are still there. This would be 17K that comes out, goes through Coldenham. Montgomery was not there at the time, as you can see. It just ended out at Scott's Corners and then went on down to Campbell Hall and to Goshen. If you lay those roads, or that map right over that map, you find that 17K comes across, goes up Drury Lane, crosses where Route 52 was, because it wasn't there at the time, and you get to the St. Andrews Road, and either goes over the hill by the Borden Farm, or down the hill to Route 208. So the roads basically stayed the same from that time. Another interesting map is a 1780s map. The interesting point, it shows a Banks Bridge. And Banks Bridge is sitting right here where Wallkill is. Wallkill is here, and Banks Bridge is a little bit farther down. This is the road that comes over the hill by Borden, and the one that comes up 208, joined, went down a little farther, and crossed the river. I suspect that was down where River Road starts, where the river was very shallow and wide. There's several references to a Banks Bridge. And the Lippincott Farm was just across the bridge from there. So we'll go on to the Andries DuBois house now. The first question is, when was it built? The Historical Society had a architectural assessment done in 2002. And their findings were that the foundation supported a smaller house at one time. It was likely to be made of wood. There was a fireplace that may have been supported in the southeast corner, and you'll see with the foundation in a minute. They also found a layer of ash uncovered circa 1790, and this sort of indicated the house had burned down at one time. The foundation as it is today, in red, is what they think was the old foundation, and in this corner there was another part of the foundation. Now this could have supported one of the Dutch-style fireplaces. It would have been very heavy, made of stone, go up through the roof. And this, I don't know if anyone ever aged this, whether that was there or put in later. But in any case, when the house was built later on, it covered the full foundation. So the house was probably much smaller, may not have even had dormers in the top. There was an entrance down here. It may have been a gambrel roof or gable roof, and there were two interior fireplaces. And that was, they figure, was built 1759 to 1769. The fireplace may have gone in this corner. Most of the Dutch fireplaces, they weren't quite straight like this. They were very large at the bottom and tapered up to the top. But they would be very heavy and would have required a lot of support. The house also could have been like this. This could be the foundation, the other foundation that was out there. This is the Finney house, or the Cornelius Bruin house. It's about the same age, similar shape, except the difference is the roof comes off and it's supported by a porch that would have been the foundation out here. So possibly it could have even been something like this. The Hasbrook house, which is the Hoyt house up on Borden Farm, that's the same thing. It was a roof that came down, was supported by another foundation that would have been out to here. The Society had a dendrochronology report done in 2002. What that is, they core drill the timber, and then you can see the rings, and then you correlate that with other known data, and with that they can age exactly when a tree was cut and when it started growing. And so they did this with various timbers, and what they found is this is in the southwest corner. These are the original beams that were done in 1769, These are huge beams. They're, they must be close to a foot square. Some of them have actually a bark on the bottom of them. They were just cut on the top. But there were only 3 of those with one that went across it. There were another couple pieces that were also of that same age. So this probably was a sill that ran away all the way across the back. So, the conclusion might be that it pretty much all of it burned right to the ground, including all of this in here. And then in 1814, that was this section, they built it probably from nothing, maybe used a few of these timbers. They may have been left, or it didn't burn them one way or the other, but there's no explanation of why all the floor stringers go this way. Alan and I have had discussions about this, and there's no reason that they would have ever done this. There's no reason, they would have put floor stringers this way, all of them would have gone that way, or they would have gone this way. So that's sort of a mystery. In 1845, this section was completely replaced. There were major update of the building in 1845. The upstairs was also remodeled. So the conclusion was that it was constructed in 1769. It burned in the 1790s, rebuilt or built from scratch in 1814, and there was major remodeling that went on in 1845. Andries DuBois, he died in 1781 at age 44. It seems like nobody lived too long in this house. When he died, his son Jonathan, he was of age, and by Dutch law, which they sort of weren't under at the time, but Dutch law says the oldest son gets the house. But Jonathan, I guess, was sort of kind to his brothers, and he said he would split the property up 1/3 for each of them. So Jonathan kept this center part, where the house was. Simon, his brother, took the part, this section. And Andries Jr., who was only 7 years old at the time, got a sliver on the top and a sliver on the bottom. They also got 3 sections up on the hill. This would be, where Plains Road is, up over the mountain, all the way up to 300. So evidently, Andries sold this part of it before he died, or sometime shortly after he bought it. There was one other thing in this. It said that there should be the road lying to the east of the house and barn. The road ran from Banks Bridge to Newburgh. So that sort of confirms that there was a bridge on past the DuBois house. There's no hint of it today. There should be some footing somewhere, but nobody's ever seen any. So, DuBois family tree, it's the same, but now we've got 3 sons, Jonathan, Simon, and Andries. The indenture or deed could not be done until the youngest son turned 21. So it was just sort of left that Sarah lived in the house with the 3 boys, and they stayed there, but when he turned 21, then the indenture would take place. And this is the actual drawing from that time, and it does show Andries has a little slice, Simon, Jonathan, because Jonathan had died by then, and Andries for the little part, and then the chunks up on the hill. That was in 1795, a few years after Andries died. But young Andries was not 21 yet, so they couldn't actually do this indenture. This is a 1798 map of Wallkill. Why I showed this, because it shows the Bruin house, or Finney house. It shows the Banks house, but there is no DuBois house. So that kind of says there was nothing there in 1798, so it burned before that time. And all the other houses are around there. Graham's house, which is Vic Burke's house. Another interesting point, it shows a bridge almost where the covered bridge was. Now in 1798, I don't know what kind of bridge they could have possibly built there, because covered bridges weren't invented yet. First covered bridges were about 1820. The banks are very high there, so how they would have built a bridge there, I don't know. And another bridge, this is the road to the dump. Right after the Wallkill, there was another bridge at that time in 1798. Now we go on to the homestead owners. So we get Andries DuBois. This said he purchased 300 acres. So I suspect there was a partner with him, and his partner got the other 300 acres. He married Sarah Lefevre. They had 7 children. He was a member of the Ulster Regiment in 1775 to 1782. He died in the house at age 44 in 1781. And of course there was no will, so Jonathan, age 22, gets the property, but he decided to split it. Jonathan DuBois had the house from 1781 to 1789. He's the one that drew up the indenture, split it up. He died in 1789 at 30. So again, nobody's living long in this house. So the mother, she was the head of the household until the children were 21 years old. And so this is Sarah and Andries DuBois. They had the house from 1789. This is young Andries. From 1789 to 1809. And this is probably when the house burned. Andries' sister Sarah, she married a Verneuil at the age of 16. And Andries turned 21. And as soon as he turned 21, he sold the homestead to his uncle Simon and Cornelius Bruin. Now Simon had the house, the land to the north of the property, and Cornelius had the land to the south of it. So they probably bought empty land at that time.
You say empty land, that'd be farming land, right?
Well, there was only 10 acres though, so it was only the homestead plus whatever they probably had for farming at that time. Now there was also hints that that may have been an inn during that time, and that young Andries was the innkeeper, but there's no proof of that. Then James Mitchell bought it in 1810. He bought it for $1,025 for 4 acres of land. I don't know, that might be a little high if there wasn't a house on it. He was the Shangam town clerk, and he is probably the one that rebuilt the house in 1810, or had somebody build it. He died in 1842, but he wasn't living in the house, so that may even be they rebuilt it as an inn. And the homestead was left to his son James Mitchell. And at that point it was rebuilt. Now this is the one for 1815. Shows the door was over here. And there was a bit of remodeling. There probably was a summer kitchen on the back. And James Mitchell, he had the place from 1842 to 1853. He married Maria van Wagenen, who was a town supervisor. And it may have still been an inn at that point because he didn't live in the house. Now, it was remodeled in 1845 to make quite a fancy house out of it. All the door casings were fancy. They raised the roof. They made rooms upstairs. So it was major renovation. And he sold it to Charles Reeve. And I checked this several times. $16,000. That's what's in the report. Or they made a mistake, one or the other. And he was a mill operator for the paper mill. And he didn't live in the house. And then he sold it to Simon DuBois again, who had it for another 9 years. He was the grandson of Andries DuBois, the son of Simon and Mary DuBois. And Simon still lived in the 87-acre farm to the north that he inherited from his father. And he died in 1865. Left the homestead to Jonathan DuBois, his son. I'm going to make this a lot clearer in the end, by the way, so you don't have to remember all these people.
No test?
So Andries was his great-grandfather, and he inherited the 96-acre home farm. He lived on the farm in 1860, that we know, and he married an Elizabeth Alsdorf. And he sold several small lots of land. Let me back up. Well, he was also supposedly in a lot of debt and was close to losing the farm. So he sold it to Jacob Tiers, who married Harriet Alsdorf's sister. So this is a sister of Jonathan DuBois's wife. Plus, he bought the 5-acre homestead lot. That's with a house on it and 5 acres. So there must have been like 4 acres across the road, or maybe it even went down to the river then, it's hard to say. And he transferred the property to Elizabeth Alsdorf, or the wife of Jonathan. So this was probably to keep them from losing the house. So Jonathan sold it to Jacob Tiers, and he transferred it to Jonathan's wife. It gets more complicated in a minute. The wife of Jonathan, there's Elizabeth. She had it from 1871 to 1891, and she was a wife. Jonathan had lots of debt, and Jonathan died in 1872 at age 38. Seems like a lot of them never made it much past 40 in that house. 78 acres of the homestead lot was auctioned off, except for the homestead lot. Now, her sister, Harriet, died, and Elizabeth marries her brother-in-law, Jacob Tiers. So, you remember all this, Mary? So John and Elizabeth, they sell 96 acre to Jacob and Harriet's son. So it's basically out of the family now for the first time, because Jacob and Harriet were not related to the DuBoises at all, to John. And they sold all except for a lot near Bridge Street, where they probably built a new, smaller house. John married Sarah Lefevre and had a daughter, Harriet. She was the first organist at the Wallkill Reformed Church. And John died at age 42. Sarah married a John Manning, but Hattie, the daughter, Millspaw, she sold the 10-acre homestead lot, and she sold it to an Eli Van Wagenen. And there's no information about him other than he owned it for 2 years, so he may have actually lived there. And he sold it to Louis DuBois and Hattie Silkworth, and they had it for 27 years. They purchased a 10-acre homestead lot and house. Louis was the third cousin of Jonathan DuBois, and they had daughters Edith and Cora. I'm finally getting to names that are familiar. And he sold 9 of the 10-acre homestead lots. Those are the ones across the street that the houses are on now. And Louis dies in 1927 at age 71. That's the first one that actually lived any amount of time there. And Edith and Cora had it from 1946 to 1980, quite a few years. They were the daughter of Louis and Hattie DuBois. Edith married a Laverne Powell, and I think they moved up to Gardner. And Cora married a James Knox Roger, and they were living in the homestead. James and Cora, they have a son called Harold Rogers, and now he has a place from 1980 to 2000. Edith conveyed her share of the property to Harold and Victoria because she was an equal partner, and it was sold to the Historical Society of Shangam and Gardner for $87,000. So that's quite a path of ownership. To make it clear, here is a family tree. You may want to look at that. I put only the DuBoises in there that were actually relevant for this. But it starts off, Andries is here, it goes to his son, and it goes to Jonathan's son. His son sells it to his uncle. His uncle sells it out of the family to this James Mitchell, probably burned in this area right here, probably before Simon got it. James Mitchell, he built it from the foundation up, but it was the 1815 one, and went to his son, who remodeled it in 20 years later or so. He sells it to Charles Reeve, who sells it back to Simon L. DuBois again, who was the son of Simon L. He leaves it to his son. He dies and leaves it to his son Jonathan. Jonathan sells it to Jacob Tears, who gives it to his wife Elizabeth. Then he marries her. Then they give it to John, the son of Jacob and Harriet. They have a daughter, Harriet. She sells it to Eli Van Wagner. And he sells it to Louis DuBois. The common ancestor is Andres' father. That's where the branch split. And from Louis, it went to the two daughters, Edith and Cora, and to Harold Rogers, and then to the Shangam Society. So I hope that clears it all up. It's a nice way of looking at it anyway. So the Historical Society, the charter was to stabilize and restore the structure, make a museum out of it, make a one-room schoolhouse, place to store artifacts, and to make it a learning center. A lot of the work has been done. In the basement, they put new footings, put in new posts and pillars. Upstairs, when they took the building over, the second floor was actually falling down in some places. So they had to jack it back up and put new structures underneath it. The same in the front room. The roof leaked terrible. There was an awful lot of water damage to the house. There's a rubber coating that's over the top of this, and it's still there. We're still waiting to actually fix or replace the roof someday. One-room schoolhouse that's actually been put in there, set up. Last year we had the house open Saturdays 10 to 2. Bob was the slave driver of that. He drove us all. We're always looking for workers. We can use them. The gutters were put up yesterday and today, so those are done. The grant fell through on the roof to replace it, so we need to start over again on that. If you want to go work at the DuBois house, contact Bob. And that's the end.
Thank you.
I know. I know, they were all in their 30s and 40s when they died. So.
That was great, Al. And I don't know if many of you remember the program we had, I don't think there's many here, when we did Mary with the diary. And that was the Simon that lived up in your old farm up there, right? And I remember the name Alsdorf, and they were all in that part of the family. And we had a program on that way back when. So maybe, does anybody?
Well, that the Simon was my grandfather.
This was
my great
this.
grandfather was Daniel D.
Right. And maybe we'll have that program again, because I don't think there's many people here who.
Daniel D was Jonathan's brother. Is that? I don't. I don't have the whole tree here, but I do have the whole
Yeah,
tree.
they were
I finally got it right,
associated.
I think.
So I remember all these
And I think,
names.
I think Jonathan, I think he lived, down there in where Ed's house,
Yeah,
you know, just
Yeah, yep.
right there on the hill.
right,
I think that's where Jonathan
Right.
lived too as well.
And they were always visiting each other for tea and going across the river to this house and that. So that's been really interesting, and I feel I know a lot more about the place than since when I was there originally when we bought it in 2000. So this has really brought it up to date and explained a lot of things. So thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
I can print this map out if you, yes.
Tony?
Is there any, pictures or any kind of, evidence of the other bridge that went across Bridge Street?
Well, we've got lots of pictures of the covered bridge, but we don't know what was there before that. You know, the one slide in there where it showed in 1798, it showed a bridge, and that was right across where the covered bridge was.
Right at that spot?
Yeah, so, and it would have had to be a fairly high bridge to get to the bank on the far side. And covered bridges weren't invented yet.
The bridge, the Banks Bridge, which was, the owner of my house was Justice Banks.
Right,
And just below my house, straight down from my house into the river, is a shale ledge. And it's only, for the most part, less than a foot down. The water is a foot deep there. In the summertime, it's not there. It just runs between the rocks. But it's very solid. The whole riverbed is absolutely relatively smooth, although there's some rocks unfortunately in there. But you can easily cross there with a wagon and a horse without ever getting stuck in the mud. And probably, that's what I told you, it went from the low spot on my side to the low spot on the other side of the river, which is by the Lippincott house,
right.
which has no banks to climb on either side, so that
Yeah, there was
makes
probably
sense. That would be the earliest one.
they probably forded the river there, but
Yeah,
then when the river comes up 3 or 4 feet, you're not gonna cross there.
Wait till it goes down.
Hold this floor.
As long as it's not 30 years, because you'll be dead by then.
There's,
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't think, I always thought about that too, but the river now has various floods and not floods, and then, but that's because of the development and, you know, and down in, you know, it rolls, the Wallkill River runs north, as everybody knows, and not many rivers in the world run north, for some reason it does. But it comes from down in New Jersey, it runs up through the pine barrens,
Pine Island,
yeah, Pine Island.
they dug it out.
And I don't think in the 1790s, 80s, that it had as much infiltration from runoff. So it probably didn't go up and down like it does now.
But wouldn't without all the dams in there, that if it rained heavy, the water would come up very fast and then go down very
Yeah,
fast.
very quick, yeah, that's kind of what I think.
Well, let's give Hal a hand, and if you have any questions,
Oh, you have,
I just, I'm just curious about the maps. Where do these maps normally reside? The 1775 map?
these are all digital. We don't have the original of any of these. One of them came from the Kings Hill organization. Another one we found down in New Windsor, in the museum that's down there. But they're all pictures of them. But where the originals are, well, that was an original that was down in, where did we find that? Not, yeah, at Knox headquarters there. That was the 1798. That's where I found the first Banks Bridge reference.
And the 1775 map?
That's the one that came from the Kings Hill.
And how far does it extend?
That's pretty much all of it. Yeah. They were only concerned about Kings Hill, you know, where the cross is up on the hill.
Yeah, right.
So they were only concerned with that. Yeah, this map.
that looks like it's
It may be a little bit,
larger map.
yeah, it may be a bit bigger than that. I'll look and see if it's bigger, I'll send it to you. Because it's kind of an interesting map. I looked at it first, this is, oh, it's just a pictorial. Till I realized the roads really are, you know, this would be Stewart Airport in here. This road would have gone right across the middle of it at one time.
Well, I'm always interested in where the roads.
Yeah. And the roads do pretty much lay over the top of the main roads today.
The land grants that you found from the Terwilligers, where
They were all
was
up in
their
Gardner.
land? Up in Gardner.
Yeah, they were all up at the back where the Wallkill runs into the Wallkill. They were in that area, up where the Bruins were there were Terwilligers
And why would they have been in the DuBois house?
well, I don't know, Stuart?
Yeah, they may not have been in the DuBois
Yeah.
house, they might have been in this town hall in their repository where, when they tore this old building down, there were a number of large map drawer units that were just being, just thrown apart, and just, nobody cared about any, and we were just picking stuff up, and that's, where those came from. So how they got into this building, might have been because that there was no other place to house them up in Gardner possible at the time. Their town hall's kind of gone through a number of steps and places, and, you know, now it's in the schoolhouse, but they didn't have a place, so I bet they wound up here for that reason, just.
Stuart thought that it might have been a Borden collecting stuff. He said that there was somebody there that was collecting all the old documents and gave them to the town, but he wasn't sure. A possibility of a bridge that went across there. This is actually where the covered bridge was. The covered bridge was torn down, and after they had to close the concrete bridge for repairs, they rebuilt this temporary bridge. So this could have been something that was built down to Banks Bridge, or even the Cornelius Bruin Bridge, because that does go up to, meets the bank on the other side. It's nothing more than wooden logs and filled with stones. Anyway, I thought I had a picture of the covered. Well, the covered bridge is in the background out there, but I've got better pictures of it someplace. That's a concrete bridge. The dam is sitting right here. Someone was in a rowboat out there that took this picture. You can see the covered bridge back here.
What happened to the covered bridge?
When they built the concrete bridge, they tore it down, or it fell down.
If you wanted to use it for a walkway or something.
Well, this was up where I came from. This is how they used to build bridges up there too. It's just cribbing filled with stone, and they laid boards across it. And every winter, the ice took it out, and they'd a couple of days, and they'd put it back again.
There's one with rust in the center, cement.
I know. I looked at it today. That's that's chewed about halfway into it now.
It's not gonna, if we get another high flood,
It'll be gone next winter. So that's.
Well, continue with the refreshments, and don't forget about the win-win auction. Consider buying a ticket or bringing a friend along with you.